Every night at 2:17 a.m., the haunting piano melody from the empty apartment next door was the only thing that made her feel less alone. Then she met the musician and discovered he had died in that room 23 years ago. The building on 14th Street didn't so much stand as slump between its more upright neighbors, a weary brick structure that seemed to sigh with every gust of wind from the river. Mia Carson had lived there for 11 months, 3 weeks, and according to the peeling calendar behind her door, 4 days. She measured time in coffee grounds and night shifts, in the blisters on her feet from standing 8 hours behind the counter of the midnight brew, and in the growing silence of her own existence. The elevator was, as always, dying a slow, groaning death as she stepped inside after her shift. It was 1:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, or rather Wednesday morning. The fluorescent light flickered like a distressed heartbeat, casting sickly shadows across the scratched metal interior. "Come on," she whispered, pressing the button for the 7th floor for what felt like the 1,000th time. The elevator lurched upward with a protest of cables that always made her hold her breath. Her apartment, 7A, sat directly beside 7B for the first 8 months. 7B had been emptier, so she'd assumed. The landlord, Mr. Henderson, a man who smelled perpetually of mothballs and regret, never mentioned neighbors. Maya liked the quiet. The building was mostly elderly tenants who went to bed with the sun, leaving the nights to her and her restless thoughts. Then, 3 months ago, the music began. Not loud, obnoxious music, not the thumping bass of a party or the tinny chatter of a television. This was piano music, solo, acoustic, drifting through the plaster and lathes as if the wall itself were humming. The first night she heard it, she'd been standing at her kitchen sink, rinsing the coffee smell from her hands. The notes were faint, tentative, a melody that seemed to wander, searching for a resolution it couldn't quite find. It was 2:17 a.m. She'd glanced at the clock automatically, a habit from a job ruled by timers and brewing cycles. She'd pressed her ear to the wall. The playing was technically proficient, but emotionally raw, each note lingering in the air like a question. It felt private, not meant for eavesdropping. She'd pulled away, feeling like an intruder. But the next night, it came again. 2:17 a.m., the same haunting progression, a little more confident this time, and the next, and the next. It became the punctuation to her lonely nights. She'd come home, shower, make a cup of tea she wouldn't finish, and wait. At 2:17, as reliably as her own fatigue, the music would begin. It was a slow dance in a minor key, a conversation between loneliness and memory. She didn't know anything about classical music, but she knew what sadness sounded like. She'd been humming its tune for years. Some nights, she talked to the wall. "Rough shift," she'd mutter, unpacking her bag. Guy yelled at me because the foam on his cappuccino wasn't cloud-like enough. What does that even mean? The music would swirl gently, a sympathetic sigh. My sister called. Again, asking when I'm moving back home. Asking when I'm going to get a real job. She'd laugh, a dry, brittle sound. The piano would answer with a delicate, descending scale that felt like a hand on her shoulder. It was ridiculous. She was a 28-year-old woman having one-sided conversations with a wall. But in the suspended animation of the early hours, it felt less like madness and more like the only thread connecting her to something real. She began to imagine the person on the other side. An old man, perhaps? A retired musician with gnarled hands and a lifetime of regrets? Or a prodigy, locked away by stage fright, practicing when the world was asleep? She pictured a room crowded with sheet music and dusty trophies, a single lamp pooling light over the keys. She never considered knocking. The music was a gift, and you didn't interrupt a gift to ask who sent it. You just accepted it gratefully into the empty spaces. The change happened on a night so cold, the windows seemed to brittle in their frames. January had gripped the city in a fist of iron, and the wind howled up from the river like a pack of lost souls. Mia trudged home, her cheeks raw, her thoughts reduced to a single desire: warmth. The elevator's groan was deeper, more pained than usual. The 7th floor hallway was a tunnel of shadows, the single overhead bulb at the far end sputtering its weak, yellowish light. She fumbled with her keys, the metal so cold it burned, and let herself into $7A. The familiar routine. Boots kicked off by the door. Coat hung on the single, stubborn hook. The immediate move to the radiator. It was lukewarm at best. Mr. Henderson believed heat was a luxury, not a right. She made tea, waiting for the shivering in her bones to subside. The clock on her microwave clicked 2:16. She sat on the floor, her back against the wall she shared with 7B. Pulling a blanket around her shoulders, she closed her eyes, waiting for the night's conversation to begin. The first note came, clear and melancholy. Then the second. The third. The melody unfolded, a beautiful, aching thing about loss and longing. It was particularly vivid tonight, each note seeming to vibrate in the very air of her apartment. She could almost see them, hanging like frozen silver droplets in the dark. Then, midway through a fresa, rising arpeggio that seemed to be reaching for something just beyond its grasp, it stopped. Not a natural pause, not the thoughtful silence between movements. It was an abrupt, shocking severance, as if a wire had been cut. The final note was cut off with a faint, discordant thump. The sound of the dampers falling onto strings. Silence rushed in to fill the void, a thick, suffocating quiet that was infinitely louder than the music had been. Mia's eyes snapped open. She held her breath, listening. Nothing. Not the creak of a bench, not the rustle of sheet music, not the soft pad of footsteps, just the wind, now sounding predatory as it clawed at the building. 5 minutes passed. 10. The silence felt wrong. It was a physical presence, heavy and watchful. The comfortable, melancholy ghost she'd lived beside for months had vanished, leaving behind a vacuum that pulled at her nerves. "Finish it," she whispered to the wall, her voice strange in the quiet. "Please." But the wall offered no reply. An hour crawled by. The tea went cold in her cup. The numbness in her feet from the long shift was gone, replaced by a prickling, restless energy. The stopped music played on a loop in her head, the unresolved phrase a constant itch she couldn't scratch. Something's wrong. The thought was clear and cold, cutting through her usual reserve. What if it was the old man she'd imagined? What if he'd had a heart attack, slumped over the keys? What if it was the prodigy, finally shattered by the pressure, sitting in the dark? She stood up, the blanket falling to the floor. Before she could talk herself out of it, she was in the hallway, standing before the door of 7B. It was identical to hers, but where her paint was chipped in a familiar, comforting pattern, this door seemed seamless. The brass 7B was tarnished but perfectly straight. No mat sat before it. No scuff marks from shoes. It looked like a door in a museum, an exhibit labeled "Apartment Circa Unknown." She raised her hand, hesitated, then knocked. The sound was too loud in the sleeping hallway. She waited, her ear close to the wood. No movement. No answering call. She knocked again, more firmly. "Hello? Is everything okay in there?" Silence. She stood there for 10 full minutes, shivering in the hallway draft, feeling increasingly foolish. Finally, with one last look at the implacable door, she retreated to her own apartment. The silence from next door followed her in. She slept fitfully, dreams filled with searching for a melody in empty rooms. The next day at work was a blur. She steamed milk into the wrong pitcher, gave a customer $6 too much in change, and stared at the clock, waiting for the night. "You look like hell, Mia," said Leo, the day shift manager, as he counted out her till. "The ghost's keeping you up?" She forced a smile. Something like that. That night, she didn't wait for 2:17. As soon as she got home, she knocked on 7B's door. Again, no answer. She pressed her ear to the cold wood. Was that breathing? Or just the building settling? She couldn't tell. On the third night, she brought a offering, a still warm blueberry muffin from the cafe. Wrapped in a paper napkin, she left it on the floor in front of the door, knocking once more before she went inside. In the morning, it was gone. Not eaten on the spot, not tossed in the hallway, trash just gone. A spark of something like hope flickered in her chest. The fourth night was the turn. The city was locked in a deep freeze, the kind that makes metal sing and breath hang in crystal clouds. Her shift had been brutal. A plumbing leak had closed the bathrooms, leading to a parade of irritable customers. All she wanted was to sleep for a year. She stood before 7B, empty-handed, too tired for rituals. She simply looked at the door and said, quietly, "I miss the music." As if in response to the words, there was a soft, dry click from within. The door swung inward, just an inch, with a long, low creak that had no business coming from a well-maintained hinge. Mia's breath caught. The hallway light did not penetrate the darkness within. It was a solid, velvety black. "Hello?" Her voice was a feather. No answer. Gingerly, she pushed the door open wider. Apartment 7B was not what she had imagined. There was no clutter of a lived-in life. No furniture aside from a single, straight-backed wooden chair placed in the exact center of the room. No rugs, no curtains, no pictures on the walls. The wallpaper a faded floral pattern that might have been elegant 50 years ago was peeling in long, sad strips near the ceiling. The air was several degrees colder than the hallway, and it carried a scent she couldn't quite place. Not decay, not mildew, but something old and still, like the air inside a sealed trunk. And there, against the far wall, was a grand piano. It was a magnificent, mournful thing. Ebony wood, dull with dust, its lid propped open like the wing of a sleeping raven. The ivory keys were yellowed with age, but they seemed to gleam faintly in the scant light from the hallway. He was sitting on the piano bench, his back to her, perfectly still. He wore a faded black sweater that seemed too large for him. The sleeves pushed up to his forearms. His hair was dark and slightly too long, falling over the collar of the sweater. His posture was not one of playing, but of waiting. "I'm sorry," Mia stammered, her hand still on the doorframe. "The door? It was open. I've been knocking. I'm your neighbor. From TA." Slowly, he turned. He was younger than she'd imagined, mid-20s perhaps. His face was pale. Not the sickly pallor of illness, but the clear, cool paleness of marble or moonlight. His features were sharp and fine, as study in angles and shadows. And his eyes, they were the color of a sky just before a storm, a deep, unsettled gray. They held no surprise, only a quiet, profound weariness. He looked at her for a long moment, his gaze traveling over her face as if reading a forgotten language. "You're the one who listens," he said finally. His voice was lower than she expected, soft but resonant. It had the quality of a sound heard from a distance, or the final, fading vibration of a deep bell. It took her a second to find her own voice. I like the music. I don't get many visitors." Mia, she took a hesitant step inside. the floorboards groaning under her weight. The cold of the apartment seeped through her socks. I was worried. The other night, the music stopped so suddenly. "I know," he said, turning back to the piano. His long, slender fingers hovered just above the keys, not touching them. "It happens sometimes. A memory gets caught. It's difficult to finish." He spoke about memory as if it were a tangible thing, a thread that could snag. "You write it? The music?" He gave a single, slight nod. "I've had time." Mia wrapped her arms around herself, glancing around the barren room. "You don't have much stuff." "I don't need much." His fingers finally descended, playing a single, pure middle C. The note hung in the frigid air, perfect and lonely. Just this. An awkward silence stretched between them, filled only by the sound of the wind outside. Mia felt like she was standing in a diorama, a frozen scene from another time. She should leave. This was private, strange, beyond the comfortable boundary of wall listening. But she didn't move. The loneliness that radiated from him was a mirror of her own, and it held her fast. "Would you?" she began, then cleared her throat. "Would you play something?" "The one from the other night. The one you didn't finish." Elias looked at her over his shoulder, his gray eyes unreadable. For a moment, she thought he would refuse. Then he shifted on the bench, making room. Not a verbal invitation, but a clear one. Heart thumping strangely, Mia crossed the room and sat beside him on the bench. The wood was ice cold. Up close, she could see the fine layer of dust on the piano's surface, the intricate carving along its side, the faint, sweet scent of old wood and ivory. He didn't speak. He simply placed his hands on the keys and began. It was the same melody, but different. Before, heard through a wall, it had been a beautiful ghost. Here, in the same room as its creator, it was alive. It was the sound of a heart breaking, slowly, note by careful note. It was the sigh of an empty room at dusk, the echo of a name called into a canyon. His hands moved with a fluid, aching grace. Each press of a key a deliberate act of remembrance or regret. Mia watched his profile. He played with his eyes closed, his face a mask of concentration and sorrow. She saw the pulse in his throat, the slight tension in his jaw. He was real, flesh and bone and melancholy, sitting in a frozen room playing a song for no one. The unresolved phrase from the other night returned. This time, he played through it. The resolution he found was not happy. It was a minor chord, rich with dissonance that somehow resolved into a profound, peaceful sadness. The final notes faded into the cold air, leaving a silence that felt earned. Not stolen. He opened his eyes, keeping them on the keys. "It's called Apartment 7 Guide 2:17 a.m. "It's perfect," Mia whispered, and she meant it. He turned his head to look at her. In the dim light, his eyes seemed to hold a galaxy of grays. "You're cold." "Your apartment is an icebox." That careful, fragile smile returned. "I don't notice anymore." A sudden practical thought occurred to her. "Have you eaten?" "I have. I don't know, soup? Or I could make coffee." He shook his head. "I don't eat but coffee. I remember coffee. I'll be right back." She hurried to her apartment, her mind whirling. He was strange, unsettling, beautiful in a stark, lonely way. And he was there, a real person, not just a comforting sound through a wall. She filled her best mug, the one that didn't have a chip with strong black coffee from her French press, the way she drank it. On impulse, she grabbed the last of the supermarket croissants, stale by now, and brought it all back to 7B. The door was still ajar. He hadn't moved from the bench. "Here." She handed him the mug. His fingers brushed against hers as he took it. They were shockingly cold, like the marble of a tombstone on a winter morning. He didn't seem to notice. He cradled the mug in both hands, bringing it to his face. He didn't drink. He just inhaled the steam, his eyes closing again, an expression of such profound, quiet longing passing over his features that it made Mia's chest ache. "Thank you," he said, his voice even softer. "You're welcome, Elias." She sat on the dusty floor, leaning against the wall, watching him. He held the mug until the steam stopped rising, until the coffee must have gone cold. He never took a sip. They didn't speak much that night, but the silence between them was different. From the silence that had followed the stopped music. This was a companionable silence, a shared space. He played a few more fragments. Pieces, he said, were unfinished. Sketches of dreams I can't quite recall. When the first gray light of dawn began to seep around the edges of the room's single, shaded window, Mia stood, her joints stiff from the cold floor. "I should go? I have work later." Elias nodded, placing the cold, full mug of coffee carefully on the floor beside the piano bench. "Will you come back?" The question was simple, but it hung in the air, weighted with a vulnerability that matched her own. "Yes," Mia said. "Tomorrow night. I'll be here." As she closed the door to 7B behind her, she heard a single, soft chord from the piano, a gentle, questioning sound. She answered by playing a single note on her own wall. Tap! From the other side, after a pause, came an answering tap. A smile, real and unforced, touched Mia's lips for the first time in weeks. She went to bed as the sun rose, and for once, she didn't feel alone in the coming day. Chapter 2. The Composition of Shadows. It became a ritual, fragile and new, every night after her shift. Mia would knock lightly on the door of 7B. Sometimes it would open immediately, as if he'd been waiting behind it. Other times she'd have to wait a minute, listening to the faint shuffle of movement inside before the click and the creak. She always brought coffee. He always accepted it, holding the mug as if it were a holy relic, absorbing its remembered warmth rather than its actual heat. He never drank it. She brought pastries, muffins, slices of cake from the cafe that were a day from being thrown out. He would break off a tiny piece, crumble it between his cold fingers, and sometimes bring it to his nose, but he never ate. They talked. At first, their conversations were like the early piano sketch is tentative, searching for a key. She told him about her job, the mundane frustrations and small victories. She told him about her family in a small town 4 hours away, a life that felt like a story about someone else, a mother who worried, a father who was quietly disappointed, a sister who had married a dentist, and had 2 perfect children and a golden retriever. "They think I'm wasting my life here," Mia said one night, sitting on the floor with her back against the piano. "And some days, I think they might be right." Elias. He was running through a series of complex scales with effortless precision. Didn't look at her. "What is a life wasted, Mia?" "I don't know." "One without purpose? Without connection? You are connected to the people who need their coffee at night. The insomniacs, the heartbroken, the shift workers. You are a small light in their darkness." "That seems a profound purpose to me." She looked up at him, surprised. "You make it sound poetic. It's mostly just cleaning espresso machines and dealing with drunks. Poetry often hides in the unpoetic," he said softly, his fingers never faltering on the keys. He, in turn, told her about music. He spoke of composers not as historical figures, but as old friends, their personalities alive in their work. He described Chopin's loneliness, Debussy's dreaminess, Rachmaninoff's stormy passion. He could dissect a symphony the way a surgeon dissects a body, pointing out the pulsing heart, the nervous system of strings, the skeletal structure of the bass line, but about himself he was reticent. She learned he had lived in the city his whole life, that he had studied piano once, a long time ago, that he preferred the night, because the daylight was too demanding. "Why this apartment?" she asked one evening, gesturing to the barren space. "It's so empty." "It's a vessel," he replied, his gaze distant. "It holds the music without interfering. Furniture, decorations, they absorb sound. They have their own memories. Here, the music is pure. It's all that's left." She didn't fully understand, but she accepted it. Elias was a creature of nuances, of shadows and half-lights. To demand full brightness would be to destroy the very thing that made him beautiful. 3 weeks after their first meeting, he touched her. It was an accident. She was handing him the coffee mug, and instead of taking it from her, his cold fingers closed over her hand, steadying it. A jolt went through her, not alarm, but a sharp, startling awareness. His skin was like ice, but the touch was deliberate, gentle. He didn't let go immediately. His storm gray eyes searched her face, and in them, she saw a loneliness so deep and ancient it stole her breath. "Your hands are always warm," he murmured, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. The sensation was electric, a line of fire tracing the path of his frozen touch. "I'd forgotten what that felt like." "Ilias." Her voice was barely a whisper. He released her hand as if suddenly remembering himself, withdrawing into the familiar, cool distance. "Forgive me. There's nothing to forgive." That small touch became a crack in the dam of their careful formality. The next night, she sat beside him on the bench as he played. Their shoulders brushed. She could feel the strange, ambient cold that seemed to emanate from him, a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. One night, she fell asleep. She'd had a particularly grueling shift, a confrontation with a regular customer that had left her feeling scraped raw. She'd come to 7B, handed Elias's coffee, and slid down the wall to the floor. Listening to him play a new piece? It was more turbulent than his usual work, full of crashing chords and frantic, racing passages that eventually dissolved into an exhausted, quiet lament. The music wrapped around her like a blanket. The cold of the floor, the dust, the weariness in her bones, it all faded. She closed her eyes just for a moment. When she opened them, the music had stopped. The room was dark, but for the faint glow of the city through the shaded window. And Elias was there. He was kneeling beside her, his face inches from hers. He wasn't looking at her with desire or even affection, but with a kind of rapt, aching fascination, as if she were a fire he longed to feel but knew would burn him. "You're here," he whispered, his breath a cloud of frost in the air between them. "I fell asleep," she mumbled, disoriented. "You were dreaming." "You smiled." She pushed herself up on her elbows. He didn't move back. The proximity was dizzying. In the near dark, his features were all stark lines and profound shadows. He was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, like a forgotten statue in a rain-swept garden. Slowly, hesitantly, he raised his hand. His fingertips, colder than the room, brushed against her cheek. It was the lightest touch, a ghost of a caress. She shivered, but not from the cold. From the intensity in his eyes, from the sheer, undiluted need she saw there. "I wish I could feel your warmth forever," he breathed. The words so soft they were almost lost. Her heart hammered against her ribs, the romantic in her, the part that had been buried under years of late shifts and lonely mornings, surged to the surface. She covered his hand with hers, holding his icy palm against her warm cheek. "They're always freezing," she said, her voice trembling with an emotion she couldn't name. "Turn the heat on, idiot." It was a feeble joke, a deflection from the enormity of the moment. But he didn't smile. His gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. For a terrifying, wonderful second, she thought he would kiss her. He didn't. He pulled his hand away as if her warmth had scorched him. Rising to his feet in one fluid motion, he returned to the piano, his back to her, a silhouette of perfect stillness. "You should go, Mia. It's very late." The dismissal stung, but she understood. Whatever was happening between them was as fragile as a spider web, and he was afraid of breaking it. She left without another word, the ghost of his frozen touch lingering on her skin. The dynamic shifted after that. A new tension hummed in the air of apartment 7B, a quiet, desperate electricity. They talked less about music and more about everything else, hopes that had faded, fears that had taken root, the quiet tragedy of small lives passing in the night. She asked him about love. They were on the floor, sharing a space but not touching, listening to a recording of a violin concerto on an old, battery-operated cassette player he produced from a corner. The sound was tinny and haunted. "Did you ever?" She trailed off, not sure how to finish. "Once," he said, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. "A long time ago. Her name was Clara. She had hair the color of autumn leaves and a laugh that sounded like water over stones." What happened? Life happened. Time, different paths. The usual story. He paused, the cassette whirring softly. She wanted a future, children, a house with a garden. I only ever wanted the next note, the next phrase. I was not present enough for the living world. In the end, my piano was my truest companion. It never asked for anything I couldn't give. Mia thought of her own brief, disappointing relationships. Men who wanted a girlfriend as an accessory, who were baffled by her night shifts, who eventually grew tired of her quietness. "Maybe we expect too much from people," she said. "Or not enough," he replied, turning his head to look at her. "You deserve someone who sees the music in you." Mia, not just the silence around it, her breath hitched. "Do you see it?" "I see everything," he whispered. It was the closest they had come to a declaration. The music he played began to change. The pervasive melancholy was still there, its core of sadness immutable. But woven through it now were threads of something else, tendrils of light, fragments of major keys that shone like gold seams in gray rock. He wrote a new piece, a short lyrical nocturne he played for her one night. "This one doesn't have a name yet," he said. "It sounds like hope," Mia ventured. "A cautious hope." "Yes," he said, his eyes on her. "That's exactly what it is." Her arms went around him, her hands sliding under his too large sweater. His skin was like ice, but she held him tighter, trying to pour her own warmth into him. He made a sound against her mouth, a low, pained moan that was both pleasure and despair. When they finally broke apart, they were both shaking. He rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed, his breathing ragged. "Mia," he breathed, her name a prayer and a curse. "I'm here," she said, her own voice unsteady. "I'm right here, Elias." He kissed her again, more gently this time, a slow exploration of a territory both terrifying and sacred. They stayed like that for a long time, on the dusty floor of the empty apartment, two lost souls finding a temporary harbor in each other's arms. Later, as she lay with her head in his lap, he stroked her hair with fingers that routely seemed to leach a little warmth from her scalp. "This is dangerous," he said quietly, not looking at her. "What is this?" "Us. You. Come in here." She sat up, searching his face. "Why?" "Because you're a recluse? Because you're different?" "I don't care, Elias. I've never felt more seen in my life." A profound sorrow darkened his gray eyes. "You are seen, more than you know. But some doors, once opened, cannot be closed. Some melodies, once played, cannot be unheard." "You're speaking in riddles." I'm speaking the only language I know, he said, his voice thick with emotion. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. Just promise me something. Anything. If this ends. If I fade. Remember the music, not the silence that comes after. A chill that had nothing to do with the temperature crawled down her spine. You're talking like you're going to disappear. Everything disappears eventually, Mia. Even echoes. She refused to dwell on it. She was happy in a strange, bittersweet way she had never known was possible. She had a secret. A beautiful, haunted secret that waited for her every night behind a creaking door. Her days at the coffee shop became bearable because they were just the intermission before the main performance. She smiled at customers. She hummed Elias's melodies as she steamed milk. Leo noticed. "You've got a glow, Carson," he said, wiping down the grinder. "Met someone?" "Something like that," she said, and her smile was genuine. The new, hopeful music became their soundtrack. He would play as she dozed against the piano. He would play as they talked. He would play as they kissed, the notes swirling around them like snow in a globe. Apartment 7B was no longer just an empty vessel. It was a sanctuary, theirs. But the real world has a way of seeping through even the most sealed of spaces. One night, she asked the question that had been hovering on her lips for weeks, the one she had carefully avoided. "Elias, why don't you ever leave the apartment?" The change in him was instantaneous and profound. The softness in his face hardened into a mask. The light in his stormy eyes guttered out. He looked down at the piano keys as if they were a great distance away. "I can't," he said, his voice flat. "Can't or won't. You could come to the cafe. I could make you a proper coffee. We could walk by the river." "I can't." The words were not shouted, but they carried a force that made the air vibrate. It was the first time he had ever raised his voice to her. He stood up abruptly, turning away from her, his shoulders rigid. Mia stood as well, her heart pounding. "Elias, talk to me. What is it? Agoraphobia? Is it something with the landlord? Did something happen?" A long, terrible silence stretched between them. The hope-filled music of the past weeks seemed a cruel mockery now. Finally he spoke, his back still to her. His voice so quiet she had to strain to hear it. "Something happened. Tell me." He turned around. The expression on his face was one of such naked anguish that she took an involuntary step back. He looked like a man about to step off a cliff. "I died here, Mia." 3 words. Simple. Devastating. She stared at him, her brain refusing to process the statement. "What?" "January 9th, he continued, his voice a monotone now, as if reciting a fact from a textbook. 23 years ago. I was 24. A congenital heart defect, they said later. One I never knew I had. I was playing right here." He gestured to the piano. The Rachmaninoff elegy. Midway through the cadenza, it just stopped my heart. The music, everything. Mia's mouth was dry. Her knees felt weak. "That's not... You're right here." "Am I?" He took a step toward her, and for the first time, she saw him not as a pale, beautiful man, but as something else. The absolute stillness. The cold that no amount of time in the room could account for. The way he never ate, never drank. The dust that never seemed to settle on him, only around him. The apartment that was frozen in time. "They found me 3 days later," he went on, relentless. "The downstairs neighbor complained about the smell. The landlord, a different man then, was cheap. He had the body removed, but he never cleaned. Never rented it out again for years. Said it was too much trouble. By the time he sold the building, it was just the empty apartment on 7, and I just stayed." The music was unfinished. Tears welled in Mia's eyes, hot and bewildered. "You're a ghost," He flinched as if struck by the word. I'm an echo, a memory with a melody attached. I'm the feeling you get when you walk into an empty room and sense someone was just there. I'm the cold spot on the floor where the sun never seems to reach. She shook her head, denial roaring in her ears. No, you're solid. I've touched you. I've kissed you. And have I ever felt warm to you? He asked softly, desperately. Has my breath ever fogged a window? Have I ever left a footprint in the dust? She thought of his icy skin, the mug of coffee that remained full and cold, of the way the dust on the floor was disturbed only by her own steps. A sob escaped her throat. This is a joke, a sick, twisted joke. I wish it were. He looked broken now, the mask of anguish crumbling into sheer despair. I tried to tell you. I tried to keep you away. But you listened. You listened to me. And I was so lonely, Mia, for 23 years. I've been so unspeakably lonely. She sank to the floor, the weight of his truth pressing down on her. A ghost. She had fallen in love with a ghost. The romantic tragedy of it warred with the sheer, primal terror. Her mind raced through every interaction, recontextualizing everything. The stopped music the first night, had that been a moment of weakness? A flicker of his spectral existence? His fascination with her warmth, was it the longing of the dead for the living? Do you feel anything? She whispered, looking up at him from the floor. When I'm here? Or am I just a distraction? He was beside her in an instant, kneeling, his cold hands gripping hers. The touch was familiar now, its otherworldly chill a confirmation of his story. I feel more than I have in decades, he said fervently, his gray eyes blazing with a desperate light.